The rain came down in sheets against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the downtown high-rise, each drop a tiny hammer against the glass. Ella watched them streak and merge, creating rivulets that distorted the city lights below into impressionist smears of yellow and red. She pressed her palm flat against the cool surface, feeling the faint vibration of the storm through the building's skeleton. It was a Wednesday night, and she was supposed to be home, helping Maya with her science fair project on volcanic eruptions, baking soda, vinegar, and the patient, loving guidance of a parent. Instead, she was here in an apartment that wasn't hers, the scent of expensive cologne and sex still clinging to her skin. She didn't turn around when she heard the soft footfalls on the polished hardwood floor. She felt him before he touched her, a displacement of air, a familiar heat at her back, his arms wrapped around her waist, his lips brushing the curve of her shoulder. "You're thinking too loud," Daniel murmured against her skin, his voice a low rumble that had, only an hour ago, made her forget her own name. Now it just made her flinch internally. Just watching the rain, she lay, her voice soft, a ghost of the passion that had filled the room. She watched his reflection in the dark glass superimposed over the city. He was handsome in a way that was almost aggressive, sharp jaw, dark eyes that held a perpetual glint of amusement. The body of a man who spent his money on personal trainers and tailored suits. He was everything her life in the suburbs was not. He was the antithesis of Mark. The name was a dull ache behind her ribs. Kind, steady, dependable Mark. The man who left her coffee on the nightstand every morning, who kissed her forehead before he left for his predictable job as an architect, who thought the world of her. The father of her 7-year-old daughter, Maya. The thought of them in their cozy, slightly cluttered house with the white picket fence she'd always mocked as a teenager now felt like a punch to the gut. A beautiful, suffocating, guilt-ridden punch. Daniel turned her round to face him. He was still half-dressed, his white shirt unbuttoned, revealing a slice of toned chest. "Stay," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a command she usually obeyed. "Mark thinks you're at a work conference in Seattle until Friday. You have 3 more nights." She looked up at him, at the face that had become her secret addiction. It had started 6 months ago, at another soul-crushing corporate fundraising gala she'd been forced to attend for her job. As a grant writer for a large non-profit, Mark had been home with a sick Maya, and Ella had gone alone, feeling invisible in a sea of black dresses and hollow small talk. Then she'd bumped into Daniel, quite literally, spilling a glass of red wine down his immaculate shirt. He'd laughed it off, his eyes holding hers a beat too long. He was a venture capitalist, a friend of a colleague, charming and unapologetically ambitious. He'd made her feel seen, not as Maya's mom or Mark's wife, but as a woman, an attractive, intelligent, desirable woman. The first kiss had happened a month later in the parking lot after another work dinner. It had been a shock of electricity that had short-circuited every moral compass she possessed, and then there was no stopping. The affair had become a parallel universe, a life lived in stolen hours. Text messages deleted before Mark could see them, and the intoxicating, terrifying feeling of being wanted with a raw, selfish intensity that marriage, with its shared mortgages and parenting schedules, had long since buried. "I can't stay," she said, the words surprising even herself. She saw a flicker of something irritation, surprise, cross his face. Daniel wasn't used to being told no. Why? Worried the babysitter will crack under the pressure of putting one kid to bed. His tone was light, but there was a barb in it. He didn't understand the minutiae of her life. To him, Maya was an abstract concept, a reason for her to leave by 10, a scheduling conflict. "It's not that." She pulled away from him, gathering her discarded dress from the floor. It was a deep emerald green, one she'd bought specifically for these trysts, something Mark would never notice, but Daniel always did. I need to go, Ella." His voice was softer now, and he came to her, placing his hands on her arms. "What's going on? You've been distant all night." Distant. She'd been present for every second, cataloging the wrongness of it all even as she drowned in it. She'd looked at him while he moved inside her and saw, not his face, but Mark's, patient and trusting, as he helped Maya with her homework. The image was a corrosive acid in her mind. "I'm just tired, Daniel." She stepped into her dress, pulling it up, the silk a cool, impersonal comfort against her flushed skin. She felt dirty, not in an exciting, forbidden way, but in a deep, soul-sick way. He watched her zip it up, his expression unreadable. "You're not going to tell me you're ending this, are you? Because that would be a shame. We're good together, you and me." Were they? They were good at this. At the clandestine meetings, the breathless passion, the escape. But what did they have besides that? He knew her favorite wine, the spot on her neck that made her gasp, the sound of her own moans. He didn't know that she was terrified of thunderstorms, that she sang off-key to 80s music while she cooked, that she secretly cried at every sappy commercial. Mark knew those things. "I don't know what I'm doing," she whispered, more to herself than to him. He sighed, a sound of masculine exasperation that grated on her nerves. "You're overthinking it. That's your problem. You're too much in your head. Just be in the moment. Be with me." It was the same line he always used, and for months it had worked. It had been the permission slip she needed to abandon her guilt at the door. But tonight, the moment felt hollow. The passion felt like a performance. The escape felt like a prison she had built for herself, brick by deceitful brick. She finished dressing in silence, not meeting his eyes. He didn't try to stop her. At the door, she paused, her hand on the cold brass knob. A part of her, the part that had been so hungry for this, wanted him to say something that would make her stay, to declare his love, to promise her a future, to give this madness a meaning beyond the physical. "Drive safe," he said. And that was it. 2 words that held no weight, no emotion. They were the words you said to a casual acquaintance, not a woman you'd just been inside. The confirmation of what she'd always suspected but refused to acknowledge. To Daniel, she was a thrilling diversion, a conquest, not a person. The drive home was a blur of windshield wipers and red taillights. The further she got from the city, the heavier the guilt became, pressing down on her chest until she felt she couldn't breathe. She rehearsed her lies. The conference had been fine. Boring as usual. Yes, she missed them terribly. No, the hotel room wasn't as nice as the website made it look. The lies were a well-worn path in her mind, and she walked them with the numb precision of a sleepwalker. When she finally pulled into the driveway of their charming colonial revival, the sight of it hit her with the force of a physical blow. The light was on in Maya's room, a warm, golden glow behind the curtains printed with cheerful clouds. The front porch light was on, a beacon guiding her home. Mark had left it on for her. He always did. She sat in the car for a long moment, the engine ticking as it cooled, the rain a soft drumming on the roof. The house wasn't just a building, it was a testament to a life built on trust. Every brick, every carefully chosen curtain, every garden gnome Maya had insisted on buying at a garage sale was a symbol of a shared history. A history she was actively poisoning. She took a deep, shuddering breath and walked inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and applesauce, a remnant of the baking Mark had probably done with Maya. She heard the low murmur of the television from the living room. She dropped her overnight bag by the stairs and walked in. Mark was asleep on the couch. The TV was on some late-night show, the laughter of the studio audience a jarring, tinny sound. He was curled on his side, one arm tucked under his head, the other resting on the open pages of a book on his chest. The Wild Robot, Maya's favorite. He'd been reading it to her and had fallen asleep waiting for his wife to come home. His face, relaxed in sleep, looked younger, more vulnerable. There was a faint smudge of what looked like marker on his cheek, Maya's handiwork. Ella stood in the doorway, her heart a raw, bleeding wound in her chest. She saw the evidence of his love everywhere. The clean kitchen, the crayon drawing of their family tacked to the frigid stick figure mom, dad, and Maya under a bright yellow sun. A drawing she knew was titled My Happy Family, the worn copy of the book on his chest. This man who worked a 9-to-5 job and never complained, who changed light bulbs and unclogged drains, who listened patiently to her rants about office politics, who loved her with a quiet, unwavering devotion that she had taken for granted and then desecrated. A tear slipped down her cheek, hot against her cold skin. She walked over to him, her footsteps silent on the carpet. She knelt beside the couch, close enough to see the gentle rise and fall of his chest, to hear the soft, even whistle of his breath. She saw a small, dark spot on the collar of his blue polo shirt, and she knew, with a certainty that broke her, that it was Maya's marker. He'd probably let her draw on him, laughing, not caring about the stain, because he was a good father, a good husband, a good man, and she was none of those things. She reached out a hand, her fingers hovering just above his cheek, close to the marker smudge. She didn't dare touch him. She didn't deserve to. She pulled her hand back as if burned turned and wrapped her arms around herself, rocking slightly on her heels. The enormity of her betrayal was a chasm opening at her feet. She had been with another man. She had lied, cheated, and for what? For the fleeting thrill of being desired, for an ego boost from a man who saw her as a temporary amusement. She looked at Mark again, at the peace on his face, and a sob caught in her throat. She had to stop. She knew that now with a clarity that was almost blinding. This affair wasn't a fling, it was a slow-motion car crash, and she was the only one who could hit the brakes. She had to end it with Daniel, completely, forever. She would block his number, quit the committee where she'd met him, do whatever it took. She would spend the rest of her life trying to be worthy of the man sleeping in front of her. The decision brought a sliver of relief, a tiny crack of light in the overwhelming darkness of her guilt. She carefully, silently, picked up the remote and turned off the television. Then she took the throw blanket from the back of the couch and gently laid it over Mark, tucking it around his shoulders. He stirred, murmuring something unintelligible, but didn't wake up. "I'm sorry," she whispered into the quiet room. "I'm so sorry, Mark." She turned off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness, and climbed the stairs. She paused at Maya's door, pushing it open just a crack. Her daughter was sprawled starfish-like in her bed, one leg hanging off the side, her stuffed bunny, Wiggles, clutched tightly in her arms. Her dark hair, so like Mark's, was a tangled mess on the pillow. Ella's heart clenched. This was her world. This was what mattered. Everything else was a dangerous, selfish illusion. She went into their bedroom, the one she shared with Mark, and the king-sized bed felt impossibly vast and empty. She lay down on her side, staring at the ceiling. She could still feel the ghost of Daniel's hands on her skin, and she wanted to scrub herself raw. She thought about Mark's gentle touch, the way he would reach for her in his sleep, and a fresh wave of anguish washed over her. She had betrayed the most sacred trust. The question that echoed in the silent room, the one that had no easy answer, was, could she ever earn it back? The next morning, she woke to the smell of coffee and pancakes. She felt groggy, hungover from a night of almost no sleep. She got up, pulled on her robe, and followed the sounds of laughter downstairs. Mark was in the kitchen, flipping pancakes, a silly apron tied around his waist that said, "Kiss the cook." Maya was at the kitchen table, carefully pouring maple syrup into a tiny lake on her plate. They both looked up when she entered. "Mommy," Maya shrieked, dropping the syrup bottle and launching herself from her chair. Ella caught her, hugging her tight, burying her face in her daughter's sweet-smelling hair. "Hey, my love," she murmured, her voice thick. "Did you miss us? Daddy made pancakes with chocolate chips." Maya pulled back, her face alight with excitement. "I missed you more than you can possibly imagine," Ella said, and the truth of the words nearly broke her. Mark came over, wiping his hands on a dish towel, and kissed her cheek. "Welcome home. How was the conference?" His kiss was light, familiar, a husbandly peck. She didn't flinch, but her entire being recoiled from the lie she was about to tell. "It was fine. Boring without you guys." "Conference?" Maya asked, her interest waning as she returned to her pancakes. "Did you learn about volcanoes?" "Not this time, sweetie, but I heard all about yours. Daddy sent me pictures of your eruption. It looked amazing." She ruffled Maya's hair and slid into a chair. Mark placed a plate of pancakes in front of her, the gesture so loving, so ordinary, that it made her want to cry. He sat down across from her with his own coffee, and for a few minutes they were a family, wrapped in the cozy bubble of a normal morning. But the bubble was made of glass, and Ella could see the cracks. Every laugh from Maya was a reminder of what she stood to lose. Every kind look from Mark was a knife twisting in her gut. The guilt was a physical presence, a demon sitting on her shoulder, whispering in her ear. The decision she'd made in the dark of the night felt flimsy in the harsh light of day. Ending it wouldn't erase what she'd done. It wouldn't undo the 6 months of lies. It would just stop the bleeding. But the wound was already there, festering. Later that morning, while Mark was in the backyard building a new birdhouse with Maya, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A text from Daniel. "Morning, beautiful. Miss you already. Last night was incredible. When can I see you again?" Ella stared at the message, her heart hammering against her ribs. The easy way out would be to block him, to pretend this never happened. But she knew she owed him him, and more importantly, she owed herself a real ending. A clean break. She couldn't just vanish. That would be another cowardly act in a long line of them. She had to tell him it was over, face to face. It was the only way to make it real, to sear the finality of it into her own soul. She typed back a brief reply. Can we meet today? Just for a bit. There's something I need to tell you. His reply was immediate. Name the place and time. She chose a public place, a small, out-of-the-way cough on the edge of the city. A place with no memories attached to either of them. She told Mark she had to run into the office for a couple of hours to finish a report. Another lie. It was becoming as easy as breathing. The worst part was, he believed her. He always believed her. He kissed her goodbye and told her to take her time that he and Maya had afforded to build. The cough was called the Daily Grind. A nondescript spot with scratched wooden tables and the smell of old coffee. She got there first, choosing a table in the back, her back to the wall so she could see the door. She ordered a tea she didn't want and watched the leaves swirl in the hot water, a nervous energy vibrating through her. When Daniel walked in, the air in the room seemed to change. He moved with the same confident swagger, and his face broke into a smile when he spotted her. He was so handsome, so effortlessly compelling. He leaned down to kiss her, but she turned her head and his lips grazed her cheek instead. He paused, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second, then slid into the seat opposite her. Hey, he said, his eyes searching her face. This is a new spot. A little rustic for you, isn't it? I needed somewhere quiet, she said, wrapping her hands around her warm mug. Daniel, we need to talk. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. A wariness. Okay, I can't do this anymore. The words came out in a rush before she could lose her nerve. The affair, it has to stop. It's over. He was silent for a long moment, just looking at her. Then he leaned back in his chair, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. It wasn't the reaction she'd expected. No anger, no pleading, no dramatic display of hurt. Let me guess, he said, his voice calm. The guilt finally got to you. You had a moment of clarity, saw your husband sleeping on the couch, and decided to be a good little wife again. His perception was a violation. It's not just that, she whispered, though it was exactly that. Ella, he said, shaking his head slowly. We both knew what this was from the beginning. We weren't building a future. We were enjoying the present. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. Are you really going to throw that away because of a little guilt? Guilt is a choice. You can choose to not feel it. You don't understand, she said, her voice trembling. I have a daughter, a family. This isn't a game. No, you're right. It's not a game. His eyes hardened just a fraction. It's a symptom. You came to me because something was missing, Ella. Don't pretend otherwise. A woman who is truly happy in her marriage doesn't end up naked in a stranger's apartment. 6 months after meeting him, you were hungry, and I fed you. The truth of his words was a poisoned dart. He was right. There had been a hunger, a restlessness, a feeling of being unseen in the daily grind of her life. She'd mistaken his attention for a cure, but it wasn't a cure, it was a drug, and the withdrawal was going to be agonizing. Maybe, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. But the cure is worse than the disease. This is killing me, Daniel. It's poisoning everything I love. He sighed, a long, slow exhale of resignation. He reached across the table and took her hand. She let him, too weak to pull away. Okay, he said softly, if that's what you need. I won't fight you, but I want you to know what we had was real, at least for me. She looked at him, searching for the lie, for the manipulation. But his eyes were clear, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of genuine sadness there. It made it harder, not easier. I'm sorry, she said, and this time the apology was for M2, for using him as an escape route from her own unhappiness. He squeezed her hand and then let it go. He stood up, dropped a $20 bill on the table. Take care of yourself, Ella. He didn't look back. She sat in the cough for an hour after he left, the cold tea untouched, her mind a blank. White space of shock. It was done. It was finally, irrevocably done. She had ended it. She should have felt relief, a weight lifted. Instead, she felt a hollow ache, a strange sense of loss for the thrilling, dangerous part of herself she was burying, and the guilt, the enormous, suffocating guilt, was still there. It hadn't vanished with the end of the affair. It had simply changed shape. It was no longer the sharp, panicked guilt of anticipation and discovery. It was now the dull, heavy, permanent guilt of having done it, of knowing what she was capable of having a secret that would forever sit between her and the man she loved, a wall she had built, brick by brick with her own two hands. The drive home was different from the night before. The rain had stopped and the world looked washed clean, but she felt more tainted than ever. She pulled into the driveway, and this time the house didn't look like a sanctuary. It looked like a stage set, and she was an actress who had forgotten her lines. Over the next few weeks, she tried. God, how she tried. She threw herself into her life with a desperate, manic energy. She planned special dinners, initiated movie nights, took Maya to the park every single day after school. She was hypervigilant, anticipating Mark's every need, smothering him with a new, frantic version of love. She was trying to build a fortress of good deeds around the gaping hole of her betrayal. Mark noticed. He wasn't stupid. One evening, after Maya was in bed, they were sitting on the back porch, watching the fireflies blink in the twilight. He was quiet, and she could feel the weight of his gaze on her. "Ella," he said, his voice gentle. "Is everything okay?" "Of course," she said, too quickly. "Why wouldn't it be?" He shrugged. "I don't know. You've just been different since you got back from that conference. More intense. Like you're trying to win an award for best wife and mother." His observation was so accurate, so marked, that it made her heart stutter. He saw her. He always saw her. That was the tragedy of it. "I'm just happy to be home," she said, the lie tasting like ash. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know you can tell me anything, right? Whatever it is, we can get through it together." The offer was a lifeline thrown to her from the shore of his unwavering love. She could grab it. She could tell him everything, right now, and let the chips fall where they may. The truth would be brutal, devastating. It might destroy them, but it would be honest. It would be real. She looked at him, at the kindness in his eyes, the trust that was still there, waiting to be shattered. And she couldn't do it. She couldn't be the one to put that look of pain in his eyes. She couldn't be the one to tell Maya that Mommy and Daddy wouldn't be living together anymore. The selfishness that had started the affair now morphed into a selfishness of preservation. She would protect them from the truth, even if it meant living a life forever. "Nothing's wrong, Mark," she said, leaning over to rest her head on his shoulder. "I'm just tired, and I love you." He kissed the top of her head. "I love you too, Ella. Always. Always." The word was a promise, a comfort, and a condemnation all at once. Life settled into a new rhythm. The frantic energy faded, replaced by quiet, simmering grief for the innocence she'd lost. She was a ghost in her own life, going through the motions, smiling the right smiles, saying the right things. But a part of her had died in that cow. The part that believed she was a good person. The part that looked at her husband without the shadow of another man lurking in her peripheral vision. She deleted Daniel's number, but she couldn't delete him from her memory. A song on the radio, a certain cologne on a stranger in a grocery store, the specific slant of afternoon light in a hotel room, these things would ambush her, flooding her with unwanted recollections and a fresh wave of shame. And then, one afternoon, 6 weeks after she'd ended it, she was at the supermarket. She was standing in the cereal aisle, debating the merits of sugary versus healthy, when she heard a familiar voice, "Ella." She froze, her hand hovering over a box of Frosted Flakes. She didn't need to turn around. She knew that voice. Slowly, she turned. Daniel was standing there, a basket in his hand, looking effortlessly casual in jeans and a simple white t-shirt. He looked good, too good. Her traitorous heart gave a painful lurch. "Daniel," she said, her voice flat, "what are you doing here?" This wasn't his neighborhood. This wasn't his world. He smiled, that same confident, disarming smile. "Just picking up a few things. My place is only about 10 minutes from here. I didn't know you shopped here." He was lying. She knew it, and he knew she knew it. This was no coincidence. He took a step closer. "You look good, Ella. Really good." "Don't," she said, holding up a hand, the box of cereal still in it. It felt ridiculous, a shield against him. "Don't do this." "Do what?" "Say hello to an old friend." His eyes held hers, and she saw it there, the old hunger, the old confidence. He hadn't come for cereal. He'd come for her. "We're not friends, Daniel. We were never friends." She put the cereal back on the shelf, her hands trembling. She needed to get away from him. He moved closer, and now he was close enough that she could smell his cologne, the one that had once driven her wild. It now just made her feel sick. "I've thought about you," he said, his voice a low murmur. A lot. I think you made a mistake. The mistake was ever starting this, she hissed, her voice laced with a venom born of fear and self-loathing. He ignored her protest. I'm not asking for forever, Ella. I'm not asking you to leave him. I'm just asking for one more afternoon. For old time's sake. You owe me that, at least for the way you ended it. You're right, she said, her voice suddenly clear and strong. She straightened her spine, looking him directly in the eye. I did end it badly. I ended it because I was a coward. But I'm not a coward anymore. What I owe you is nothing. I owe my husband everything. And I will not let you or anyone else take that from me again. She saw the surprise flicker in his eyes, then a flash of something else, respect, maybe, or annoyance. He opened his mouth to speak, but she cut him off. Leave me alone, Daniel. This is my life. My family. Stay out of it. She pushed her shopping cart past him, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might explode. She didn't look back. She walked through the rest of the store in a daze, grabbing items at random, her mind a blank. She paid, loaded her car, and drove home on autopilot. She had stood up to him. She had chosen Mark out loud in the cereal aisle. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like the closing of a chapter she desperately wanted to forget, but knew she never would. That night, she lay in bed next to Mark, listening to his steady breathing. She thought about Daniel in the supermarket, about the ease with which he'd tried to slip back into her life. She thought about the look in his eyes, the assumption that she was still his for the taking. And for the first time, she felt not guilt, but a cold, hard anger. At him for pursuing a married woman. At herself for being so vulnerable to his pursuit. At the whole sordid mess. She looked at Mark's sleeping face. He was so peaceful, so trusting. She reached out and gently traced the line of his jaw. He stirred and, without opening his eyes, he reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers, and held it against his chest. It was an unconscious gesture, a reflex of love. And in that moment, Ella made a new decision. It wasn't just about ending the affair anymore. It was about rebuilding. It was about becoming a person worthy of this man's unconscious, sleeping trust. It wouldn't be easy. The guilt would likely never fully disappear. It would be a scar, a permanent reminder of the worst thing she'd ever done. But scars could fade, and she would spend the rest of her life making sure that the woman who had created that scar was a stranger, a ghost of a former self. She squeezed his hand, and he squeezed back in his sleep. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in months, the darkness behind her eyelids didn't feel like a place of secrets and shame, but simply a place to rest on her way to a tomorrow she would try every single day to deserve. Months turned into a year. The first anniversary of the end of the affair passed without note. A silent milestone in Ella's private calendar of atonement. Life continued its steady, predictable rhythm. Maya lost to teeth and gained a passion for soccer. Mark got a promotion at work, a well-deserved recognition of his talent and dedication. They painted the living room a warm, comforting shade of sage green. They went on a family vacation to the beach, building sandcastles and chasing waves. And Ella laughed, a real, uninhibited laugh, for the first time in what felt like forever. The laughter didn't mean she'd forgotten. It meant she was learning to live with the memory. The sharp, stabbing pain of guilt had dulled to a persistent ache, one she'd grown accustomed to. Like a chronic but manageable condition, she had become an expert at managing it. She never let her phone out of her sight, a habit born of the terror that Mark might accidentally stumble upon a deleted text, a remnant of that other life. She avoided certain restaurants, certain parts of the city, certain topics of conversation. She built her life around the secret, a labyrinth of avoidance designed to protect the man she loved from the truth. That would devastate him. The effort was exhausting, a constant, low-level hum of anxiety beneath the surface of her days. But she told herself it was worth it. Their marriage, on the surface, was better than it had been in years. She was more present, more appreciative. She had learned the true value of what she had. A lesson carved into her soul by the pain of almost losing it. Mark seemed happier, too. He thrived on her attention, on the renewed intimacy that had crept back into their relationship. He attributed it to the natural ebb and flow of a long marriage, a second honeymoon of sorts. He had no idea it was built on a foundation of guilt and a desperate attempt at penance. One crisp autumn Saturday, they decided to have a garage sale. It was Mark's idea, a way to clear out the clutter of years from the basement and the attic. Ella agreed, seeing it as another opportunity for normalcy, for the shared project of a life. They spent the morning hauling out boxes of forgotten treasures and accumulated junk. Old baby clothes of Maya's, books they'd never read again, kitchen gadgets that had seemed like a good idea at the time, and a mountain of Mark's old college textbooks. Ella was sorting through a box of Mark's things from the attic, a collection of dusty trophies and faded photographs. She was smiling at a picture of him in his college rowing team uniform, so young and carefree, when her hand brushed against a small, worn leather journal at the bottom of the box. It was old, the leather cracked and faded. She pulled it out, curious. It wasn't a diary, exactly. More of a sketchbook. She knew Mark had loved to sketch when they first met, before the demands of work and family had pushed it aside. She opened it, expecting to find architectural doodles or landscapes. The first few pages were exactly that, pencil sketches of buildings, trees, a detailed study of a bicycle. But as she flipped further, the subject matter changed. She saw sketches of a woman, a drawing of her sleeping, her hair fanned out on the pillow, a look of peace on her face. Another of her reading on the couch, her legs curled under her. Another, more detailed, of her laughing, head thrown back at some long-forgotten joke. They were beautiful, tender, rendered with a loving hand that saw not just her features, but her essence. Her heart swelled with a complex mix of love and renewed guilt. He had seen her like this. He had loved her like this. And she had. She was about to close the sketchbook, overcome with emotion, when she turned one last page. And the world stopped. It wasn't a sketch. It was a photograph, a color photograph, slightly creased, as if it had been folded and unfolded many times. It was a picture of her and Daniel. They were at a restaurant, a fancy one she remembered now with a jolt of sickening clarity. It was their third or fourth date. She was leaning towards him, laughing at something he'd said, and he had his hand on her arm. The look on her face in the picture was unmistakable. It was the look of a woman infatuated, captivated, utterly lost in the moment. She didn't recognize the angle. It must have been taken by someone at a nearby table, a stranger capturing a moment of forbidden intimacy, a moment that was now in her husband's hands. How had he gotten this? When? The question slammed into her like physical blows. The date on the photograph, printed in small white letters in the corner, was from over a year ago, from the very beginning of the affair. He'd had this for over a year. A year of her atonement, a year of her careful lies and labyrinthine avoidance. A year of him being happier, of their second honeymoon. And all that time he had known. He had held this picture, had looked at his wife laughing with another man, her lover, and he had said nothing. The garage sale, the happy family, the shared projects, the bedtime stories, the I love yous, it had all been a performance. But whose? Hers or theirs? A cold, deep dread, colder than any guilt she'd ever felt, began to creep through her veins. She heard his voice from the driveway, cheerful, calling out to a customer. That lamp? $5 and it's a steal. She clutched the photograph, her knuckles white. The sketchbook slid from her lap and landed on the concrete floor of the garage with a soft thud. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. The world she had so carefully reconstructed, brick by guilty brick, had just been revealed as a house of cards, and the slightest breath of truth was about to send it all tumbling down. She heard his footsteps approaching. He was coming back. She looked at the photograph one more time, at the woman she used to be, laughing with a man who wasn't her husband. Then she looked up and saw Mark standing in the doorway of the garage, silhouetted against the bright autumn sun. He was holding a cup of coffee, a peaceful, contented smile on his face. He looked at her, sitting amidst the debris of their shared past, and his smile didn't waver. "Find anything good?" he asked, his voice light and easy. Alice stared at him, the photograph a burning brand in her hand, and for the first time she had absolutely no idea what to say. The lies, her constant companions, had finally deserted her. She was left alone with the truth and the terrifying, unreadable expression in her husband's patient, waiting eyes.